Greetings, fellow travelers, vagrants, explorers, wildlanders, and welcome to the Retro Wildlands. My name is Nomad, and this is my gaming podcast where I like to share my thoughts and experiences with a video game that I've discovered or rediscovered while roaming the gaming wildlands. Thank you for joining us around the campfire, my friend. Today marks the beginning of something new, and I'm glad you're here to partake in that. Over the last several years of roaming the gaming wildlands, we've experienced some pretty interesting games and dove into some awesome experiences. But the gaming wildlands are vast, and while we mainly focus on retro experiences, I still love to dive into some more modern ones. Over the last year, I've taken to chronicling my modern game experiences into a leather-bound book that I have affectionately started to call our Expedition Log. In this episode of the show, we're going to open the log and dive into one of the more modern games that I've partaken in so I can share my thoughts with you and bring you into the game experience with some of the usual music and sound that you've been accustomed to. It should be a short, fun, and exciting journey, so make yourself comfortable by the fire and settle in. Today, we're going to be checking out Expedition Log number 1, Metroid Dread. I waited over 4 years to play this game, and man, what a mistake. Metroid Dread was one of those games that was sitting in my orbit for years. It was, and still is, praised to hell and back. People talked about it endlessly, and somehow I just kept pushing it down the backlog. Even after bringing home a physical copy I found on clearance somehow. But one day, though, I finally booted it up, and within 15 or so minutes, I realized, oh, this is why people won't shut up about this game. Overall, Metroid Dread completely grabbed me. It completely stressed me out, and ultimately earned a permanent spot among my favorite Nintendo Switch games. Gaming Wildlands Expedition Entry 1. Game, Metroid Dread. System, Nintendo Switch. Originally completed, July 5th, 2025. Metroid Dread was an experience I was genuinely glad I finally took the time to have. I started my Metroid series journey by checking out Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo, and I had an amazing time with it, so I knew Dread was going to be a good one. From the moment I took control of Samus, I was hooked by how silky smooth and fast the gameplay felt. Within seconds, I could tell that this game just felt right. Movement was tight, it was responsive, and it was deliberate in a way that makes every jump, every slide, every shot feel purposeful. It reminded me a lot of Super Metroid, not just in structure, but also in vibe. The constant sense of isolation, danger around every corner, and quiet dread that follows you everywhere took me back to that SNES game, but also felt new and exciting. The setup for Dread, I feel like, is pretty on brand for the series. The Galactic Federation receives evidence that the X-Parasite, previously believed to be eradicated, is somehow alive and thriving on a desolate planet known as ZDR. In response, they dispatch 7 E.M.M.I robots to investigate. E.M.M.I, by the way, stands for Extraplanetary Multiform Mobile Identifiers, which is a wonderfully obtuse sci-fi acronym that also feels very on brand for Metroid. As one would expect, because this is a Metroid game and things never go smoothly, the Federation loses contact with all of the E.M.M.I, and when that happens, they do what they always do, they call up Samus Aran.
We'll soon be entering ZDR's atmosphere. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
When Samus arrives on ZDR, things immediately go sideways. She encounters a Chozo warrior who absolutely wipes the floor with her. Samus is stripped of most of her abilities, her exit back to the ship is sealed off, and she's left stranded deep underground. From the very start of the game, the objective is crystal clear. Get back to the surface, return to your ship, and get the hell off this planet. There are no side quests, there are no distractions, it is just pure survival instinct that drives things forward from here. That simplicity is part of what makes Metroid Dread so effective, and that's what immediately hooked me. I mean, I knew there would be more to it as I went, but the simplicity of the setup was different and it was thrilling.
Uploading data.
I have determined that you are somewhere within the depths of ZDR. Your top priority should be to return to your ship on the surface. This situation is precarious. Trust your instincts as you navigate upward. The situation remains unclear, but your priority hasn't changed. You must return to the ship.
If you've played even one Metroid game before, you probably know exactly what to expect from here, and that's exactly one of the game's biggest strengths. You're dropped into an unfamiliar world with very little guidance and told, essentially, go forth and figure it out. ZDR is one massive interconnected labyrinth filled with locked doors, hidden passages, and environmental puzzles. Oh, and there's upgrades that you're going to be coming across too that will slowly open up that world even farther. Certain areas are inaccessible until you find the right weapon or ability, which means exploration and backtracking are baked directly into the experience. I'll be honest though, the one flaw in this entire gameplay loop, which is something all games in the genre share, is all the backtracking you're going to inevitably do to find that one thing you missed to move forward. I feel like I've been mentioning this a lot over the last couple shows, but again, I have to mention, for me, it happens every time, and I'm to a point in my life where I detest the idea of wasting time or having to do something that doesn't have any real meaningful return, so this is the one thing I don't really like about this genre. I know that is, again, a me problem, but I still have to mention it. Regardless though, this gameplay loop is the heart and soul of Metroid Dread, and it's also the point where the game either clicks for you or it doesn't click for you. Basically, you explore, you hit a roadblock, you mentally file it away, and then you move on. Eventually, you will stumble across a new upgrade or a new item, and maybe that's a mobility tool or maybe it's a new weapon, but suddenly your brain should light up. You should remember that door from earlier, that weird block you couldn't break, or even that suspicious gap you couldn't quite reach. And now, given what you just found, you might be able to surpass that obstacle. At the end of the day, that moment of realization is incredibly satisfying, and Dread delivers it over and over again. What really impressed me, if you're looking at the entire package here, is how much autonomy the game gives the player. Yes, there is a critical path forward, but Dread is very flexible in how you approach it. Skilled players can even sequence break, meaning they can use abilities in creative or unintended ways to access upgrades or areas earlier than expected. And the nice thing is, the game doesn't really punish you for doing that. In fact, I've always had the impression that the developers quietly encourage this behavior. There may be a quote-unquote preferred path to take, but it isn't the only one. The tools you need are scattered throughout the world, and while the game gives you a brief tutorial when you pick something up, that's it. From there, you're on your own to discover what the thing does, and how you can best use it. That design philosophy always stands out to me. The game trusts you. It trusts you that you'll experiment, fail, adapt, and learn. The game doesn't hold your hand, but it also rarely feels unfair. When you get stuck, it's because you haven't quite pieced things together yet. That's not a design problem. Again, looking at myself, it's a you problem. And when you do figure out what you do need to do next or where you do need to go, it is incredibly rewarding. One of my absolute favorite additions to Metroid Dread, and the single best part of the entire experience for me, due to how it changes and expands the usual Metroid experience, are the E.M.M.I robots themselves. I know that might sound weird because they are pure nightmare fuel, but these things are terrifying in the best way possible. They move like silent predators, and they are relentless. Each E.M.M.I that you encounter is confined to a specific zone, but the moment you enter that territory, the entire tone of the game shifts. The music changes, the lighting adjusts. Your posture probably changes a little bit too, because suddenly you're not just exploring, you're back in pure survival mode. I always gripped my Switch just a little bit tighter whenever I was in their territory.
E.M.M.I send out a pulse to detect vibrations in the air within a certain range. Essentially, they can hear you. Upon detecting vibrations, an E.M.M.I enters surveillance mode to track their source. Stay out of its line of sight when this happens. Otherwise, the danger to you increases dramatically. I estimate a 99% probability of death if an E.M.M.I captures you. There may be a very small opportunity to escape, but exploiting this window will be virtually impossible. Your only option now is to evade capture and find an exit. Your highest priority in an E.M.M.I zone should be simply to survive.
Early on, the E.M.M.I robots themselves are completely invincible. You cannot fight them. You can only hide, run, and maybe pray. They patrol their zones and they are on the hunt for you. They respond to sound, and they will actively hunt you if they catch a glimpse of Samus. If you happen to get yourself spotted, alarms will blare, the screen goes red, and the music puts you in an immediate panic. If an E.M.M.I grabs you, it's almost always a game over, unless you manage to parry one of its attacks. The catch, though, is that the timing window is extremely tight and it changes all the time. So even if you've been successful parrying one of these machines before, you cannot rely on muscle memory alone. You have to dial in, wait, and look for that little glimmer before you try to escape, and even then, you're probably not going to be successful. Even though these areas are kind of staged and you somewhat know what to expect as you get used to these creatures, every encounter is different and every encounter is tense. I personally found these sections genuinely thrilling. Stressful, yes, but the good kind of stress. The kind where you're leaning forward on the couch without realizing it. Sneaking through E.M.M.I zones, doing your best to stay out of sight, sliding under doors at the very last second, it all kept my heart rate just a little higher than normal. Over time, as you gain more experience and gather more useful abilities, these encounters do become somewhat easier. You start to understand their behavior, their patrol routes, and how to manipulate the environment. But that initial feeling of helplessness never fully goes away, and I love that. To me, that feeling is the essence of Metroid. That quiet panic mixed with confidence that grows over time. You're powerful, but you're never comfortable. Even when Samus is fully powered up, armed to the teeth with missiles, beams, and other upgrades, the game still finds ways to make you feel small and vulnerable. The E.M.M.I specifically amplify that sensation tenfold, and they're one of the smartest design choices in the entire game. Combat outside of the E.M.M.I zones is just as satisfying. Boss fights are fast, aggressive, and demanding. They require you to actually engage with the game's mechanics rather than brute forcing your way through those encounters. Pattern recognition, precise movement, and smart use of abilities are all essential. When you finally do take down a tough boss, it feels earned. You didn't just win because your numbers were higher, you won because you got better and leveraged what you've learned up to that point in the game. Visually speaking, Metroid Dread is stunning, especially considering the hardware that it's running on. This is easily one of the sleekest and best looking games on the Nintendo Switch. The environments are detailed without being cluttered, and each zone on ZDR has its own distinct identity. From icy caverns to mechanical facilities to ancient ruins, the world feels cohesive but also varied. Samus herself is animated beautifully, with fluid transitions between movement, combat, and traversal that make her feel incredibly powerful and agile. The audio design deserves just as much praise. The soundtrack perfectly complements the atmosphere, often taking a more subdued, ambient approach that reinforces the feeling of isolation. And when the music does ramp up, especially during boss fights or E.M.M.I encounters, it hits hard and it's extremely effective. Sound effects throughout are crispy and punchy, from the echo of Samus's footsteps to the mechanical noises of enemies nearby. I highly recommend playing this game with headphones if you can to really get the most out of this experience. I played a large portion of Metroid Dread on a flight to one of my annual work trips, and I genuinely forgot that I was thousands of feet in the air. I was completely absorbed in the visual and audio experience. If I had to point to one thing I didn't love about Metroid Dread, and I know I am nitpicking here, it would be the sheer size of the game world. ZDR is massive, with multiple zones and countless interconnected rooms. This to me though, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it makes the planet feel like a real, sprawling space. But on the other hand, it occasionally led to frustration for me personally because, like I've already touched on, when it comes to games like this, I get frustrated when I can't figure out where I need to go next, and that certainly does not help when I'm playing in a world that's as big as the one in Dread. I barely remember what I had for breakfast some days, so I'm not always great at remembering that one specific door I couldn't get into hours ago, even if I have the exact ability that I need. To the game's credit though, the map system is excellent. I used it constantly, dropping markers and checking pathways to keep myself oriented. Still, there were moments where the time it took to remember where I needed to go and then physically get there pulled me out of the experience a little bit. Again, for the umpteenth time, this is a me problem, not a design flaw or anything with the game. Your mileage will absolutely vary when it comes to games like this, but exploration and backtracking are fundamental to the genre, and Metroid Dread executes on them as well as any game can. By the time the credits rolled, I was thoroughly impressed. Metroid Dread isn't just a great Metroid game, it's one of the best games that I've played on the Switch, or actually one of the best games that I've played, period. It honors the legacy of the series while confidently pushing it forward. It's challenging without being punishing, atmospheric without being overwhelming, and rewarding without constantly dangling carrots in front of the player. Sure, the allure and potential scare factor of the E.M.M.I can wear off over time once you learn how to deal with them, but they still remain a fantastic addition to an already stellar experience. All in all, Metroid Dread has earned every accolade it's received. If you are a longtime Metroid fan, this is an essential play for you. If you're new to the series, this is an incredible place to start. And if you're like me, someone who waited way too long to finally play this game, do not make the same mistake. Get on this game, and get on it soon, my friends. And with that, we've come to the end of our first entry into the Expedition Log, my friends. This has been the Retro Wildlands Expedition Log number 1, Metroid Dread. Thank you very much for tuning into the show today, my friends. Before we part today, though, don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media platforms to stay informed on the latest goings-on around here. And be sure to check out theretrowildlands.com for all the latest content drops. You can sign up for a free account on our website using just your email address, which will give you the ability to leave comments on any podcast, blog post, or video on the website. It's a great way to give me your feedback as well as interact with other members of the community. The Retro Wildlands is also part of the SuperPod Network, home of some other awesome video game podcasts and other gaming content. The network has blog posts, videos, and tons of other content, so be sure to check all of that out by heading over to superpodnetwork.com. Thank you all again for hanging out with me by the campfire today. Be sure to come back in a couple weeks where we'll turn the page in our expedition log and check out the next entry in our logbook. I may have been a late adopter of the Nintendo Switch, but I've had a great time experiencing some amazing games on the system. And our next log entry will continue my journey with the Nintendo Switch as we read all about the absolute best 3D platformer on the console, and arguably, for some, in all of gaming right now. And that game is Super Mario Odyssey. Until then, my friends, my name is Nomad, and you can find me roaming the Retro Wildlands.